the bride they mocked. The wind swept across the wide plains of Wyoming, carrying with it the smell of dust, sagebrush, and something more bitter, gossip. In a small town that clung to the edge of the frontier, people talked. They always talked. But tonight, the talk had turned crueler than usual. In the back corner of the saloon, where lantern light flickered against cracked wooden walls, a group of ranch hands and drifters laughed over their cards and whiskey. Their voices carried, and the laughter wasn't the kind that came from joy. It was the laughter of men with nothing better to do than mock someone weaker than themselves. Imagine it. One of them drawled, slamming his mug against the table. A blind bride, ain't even fit to sew a man's shirt, much less tend a ranch house. Another spat tobacco juice into a rusted bucket and sneered. Reckon she won't even know what man she's talking to. Could be me, could be you. All the same to her. Their laughter roared through the smoky room. At the bar, the town's postmaster, a wiry old man with a stiff back, shifted uncomfortably. He had brought the news earlier that day. A marriage arrangement had been struck between a rancher and a young woman. But the rancher hadn't asked for her. The town had sent her. As a joke. Everyone knew the story. Evelyn Carter was her name, a girl of 20 summers. She had been born with eyes like storm glass, pale, unfocused, unseeing. Her father, a farmer, had died in debt. Her mother passed not long after. She was left in the care of distant relatives who didn't want her. They called her the burden. A blind girl in a world where survival demanded sharp eyes and strong arms. When the talk began of Jacob McAllister, the rancher who lived miles beyond town with no wife and no kin, the idea had twisted into something cruel. Send her to him, someone had joked. A rancher too busy with cattle to notice what he's got at home. He won't turn her away if she comes claiming marriage. And the laughter stuck. By the time the sun set that evening, Evelyn's few belongings were packed in a rough trunk, and she was placed on a wagon heading toward Jacob McAllister's ranch. No one asked what she wanted. No one asked if her heart trembled at the thought. They just sent her away. The wagon ride jolted and rattled across the hard-packed earth. Evelyn sat quietly, hands folded tightly in her lap, her pale eyes gazing at nothing and everything all at once. "Don't fret now," said the old driver, who had been paid a few coins to take her. His voice carried the kind of pity she hated. "McAllister's a hard man, but he ain't cruel. Least not that I've heard." Evelyn gave a small nod. She wasn't one for words when the world had taken so much from her. But inside her chest, her heart pounded like a frightened bird. She had never met Jacob McAllister. She had only heard the whispers that he was broad-shouldered, with a scar along his jaw, a man who had carved his living out of wild land with his bare hands. They said his cattle grazed across more acres than a person could walk in a day. They also said he was lonely, and loneliness could make a man either gentle or bitter. Evelyn did not know which she would find. The wagon slowed as it approached a stretch of land fenced with rough-hewn timber. The scent of horses, hay, and wood smoke reached her. She heard the steady pounding of hooves somewhere near. The driver called out, "Whoa," and the wagon creaked to a halt. "Miss Carter," the driver said softly, "we're here." Evelyn tightened her grip on the trunk in her lap. With trembling fingers, she traced the worn wood grain, a reminder of the last tangible thing she could truly recognize. She stood slowly, relying on the walking stick she carried, and listened as boots crunched across gravel. "Who's there?" A man's voice cut through the air, deep, rough, carrying the weight of command. The driver cleared his throat. "Got something for you, McAllister." Evelyn heard the pause in his voice, the hesitation of a man caught between truth and shame. She's your bride." The silence that followed was long enough for Evelyn's breath to hitch. "My what?" the rancher growled. His boots approached, heavy and sure. Evelyn could hear each step, feel the presence of someone far larger and stronger than herself. Her heart pounded so loud she thought he might hear it. The driver muttered something about town's idea and not my doing, then scrambled back onto the wagon. The wheels rattled as the wagon pulled away, leaving Evelyn standing alone with her trunk, her cane, and a man she had never met. She drew in a breath. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she said softly, steadying her voice. "The town sent me. They said I was to be your wife." The silence stretched. She felt the weight of his stare, though she could not see it. Finally, he spoke. "Get inside." It was not warm, nor was it cruel. It was simply a command. Jacob McAllister hadn't asked for a wife, least of all a blind one. When he had first seen her standing there, fragile as a reed, pale eyes searching the air, his gut clenched with something he couldn't name. Anger at the town for their cruelty, pity he didn't want to feel, and something else, an odd pull in his chest he didn't care to examine. But he wasn't a man to turn away someone in need, not even if it was forced upon him. So he let her inside. The cabin was large enough for one, barely enough for two. The fire snapped in the hearth, throwing shadows across the room. She stood near the doorway, clutching her trunk, her cane tapping lightly against the floorboards. "Put that down," he said, nodding to the trunk. She hesitated. I can manage." His jaw tightened. Stubborn little thing. He took the trunk from her hands anyway, setting it down near the wall. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded, relief flickering across her face. He ladled stew from the pot hanging over the fire and set it on the table. She found her way to the chair with careful steps, tapping her cane lightly, and sat. Jacob watched her as she felt for the spoon, her fingers moving delicately, graceful even in blindness. She ate slowly, neatly, not wasting a drop. For the first time that day, silence didn't feel heavy. When she finished, she folded her hands and whispered, "Thank you." Jacob cleared his throat and stood. "Spare rooms at the back. You'll sleep there." She nodded, rising carefully. As she passed, Jacob caught the faintest trace of lavender clinging to her hair. It stirred something he quickly shoved down. This wasn't a marriage. Not in truth. She had been sent as a joke, and he would not play the fool. But as he lay awake that night, staring at the wooden beams above his bed, he couldn't shake the image of her pale eyes, unseeing yet full of quiet strength. And for the first time in years, Jacob McAllister wondered if the loneliness he had worn like a second skin might not last forever. The mother of two, the seasons turned on the Wyoming plains with a stubbornness that matched the people who lived there. Summer's dry heat gave way to the sharp bite of autumn, then winter's merciless snow. Through it all, Evelyn Carter remained at Jacob McAllister's ranch, a woman who had been sent as a cruel joke, yet found herself shaping the heart of a home. It had not been easy. In the early weeks, she struggled. Evelyn insisted on doing her share, though she had never worked a ranch. She learned to knead bread by touch, to sweep the cabin by counting her steps, to sew Jacob's shirts with careful fingers that traced every stitch. She even learned the rhythm of the ranch itself, where the pump stood, how the corral fence curved, how the air smelled different near the barn. Jacob tried at first to keep her from the work. "You'll hurt yourself," he grumbled one evening when he found her gathering kindling. She lifted her chin. "I may be blind, Mr. McAllister, but I'm not useless." That stubborn streak made him bite back a retort. He respected grit, and though he would never admit it out loud, he admired how she met each obstacle not with despair, but with quiet determination. Over the months, an unspoken rhythm grew between them. Jacob's boots thudded across the porch at dawn. Her hands set coffee steaming on the table. At night, when he returned bone-tired from the herds, she sat by the fire, sewing or humming softly, her pale eyes turned toward the warmth. Something about that sound, her soft voice in the stillness, made the cabin feel less like four walls and more like a home. One winter night, with snow piled against the windows and wind howling like wolves, Jacob sat sharpening his knife at the table. Evelyn stirred stew at the hearth. "Jacob?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking the crackle of firewood. He looked up. She seldom used his name. "Yes." "Why did you let me stay?" His hand stilled on the knife. He wasn't a man who gave away pieces of himself easily. But her question lingered like frost in the air. "Town sent you here as a joke," he said finally. "I wasn't about to let them have the satisfaction of seeing me throw you back." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "So pride kept me here?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "Pride at first. But it ain't just that now." Silence stretched between them, thick and fragile. Evelyn's heart thudded, but she did not press further. She simply stirred the stew, her pale eyes glistening with something she dared not name. Spring came, thawing the earth and the silence between them. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Jacob returned from the fields to find Evelyn sitting on the porch, humming a lullaby. Except it was softer, gentler, as if she cradled something only she could feel. "Evelyn," he asked, stepping closer. Her hands rested over her stomach. She tilted her face toward his voice. "Jacob, I believe the Lord has blessed us. I'm carrying a child." For a moment, he stood frozen, the weight of her words slamming into him harder than any storm. A child. His child. He knelt beside her, rough hands trembling as they covered hers. "You're certain?" "Yes," she whispered, her unseeing eyes shining. "I can feel it." Jacob had faced stampeding cattle, outlaw rustlers, and winter blizzards that killed men by the dozen. But nothing had ever terrified him like the thought of protecting what now grew within her. From that moment, something shifted in him. He wasn't just a rancher anymore. He was a husband in truth, and soon a father. The months that followed were both the hardest and the most tender of Jacob's life. Evelyn's belly grew round, and with it, his fierce protectiveness. He built new fences around the cabin yard so she could walk safely. He carved a rocking chair with his own hands, smoothing the wood until it was satin beneath her fingers. He worked the ranch from dawn till dusk, but never failed to return with fresh milk or wildflowers just to see her smile. The townsfolk, of course, had not forgotten their cruel joke. Whispers followed Jacob whenever he rode in for supplies. "Blind bride. Burden. Won't last long." But when Evelyn walked into town at his side, chin lifted, a hand resting on her swelling stomach, those whispers faltered. There was strength in her step, grace in her unseeing eyes. She was no one's burden. She was Jacob McAllister's wife, and she was carrying his child. The night came sooner than expected. A summer storm raged outside, lightning splitting the sky as thunder rattled the cabin walls. Evelyn clutched the bed frame, pain tearing through her. Sweat slicked her brow. "Jacob," she gasped. He was at her side in an instant, panic gripping his chest. "I'm here. I ain't going anywhere." Hours dragged on. Evelyn's cries mingled with the storm's fury. Jacob, who had faced down every hardship the frontier could hurl at him, felt powerless watching the woman he loved fight for life. Then, at last, a thin, piercing wail filled the cabin. Jacob's hands trembled as he held the tiny, squirming child, wrapped in blankets. "It's a boy," he whispered, choking his voice. Evelyn reached out blindly, tears streaming. "Let me hold him." He placed the baby in her arms. Her fingers traced the small face, the soft tufts of hair. Her smile shone brighter than any sunrise. But before the joy could fully settle, another cry pierced the night. Jacob's eyes flew wide. "Twins," he breathed. Hours later, Evelyn lay exhausted but radiant, cradling two tiny bundles against her chest. One boy, one girl. Jacob sat at her side, his rough hand brushing her hair back tenderly. "They laughed when they sent you here," he said hoarsely, staring at the newborns. "Called you a burden, but you've given me more than I ever dreamed." Her pale eyes turned toward him, shimmering. "We've given each other a home." Word spread quickly. By dawn, the town knew. The blind bride had not been cast aside, not abandoned. She had borne the rancher 2 children. And when Evelyn rode into town weeks later, holding one infant while Jacob carried the other, the whispers stopped altogether. No one dared laugh anymore, because the woman they had mocked, the girl they had thrown away as a jest, had returned with a family stronger than any cruelty. She was no longer the blind bride. She was Evelyn McAllister, wife, mother of 2, and the heart of a ranch that would endure for generations.